The War Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Thraxus slammed 3 of his appendages against the tactical display. His scales rippled with frustration, a deep purple that indicated he was about 2 seconds away from ordering someone's immediate demotion. The holographic projection showed Earth's military formations, and honestly, they looked pathetic. This is what they send against the Corvath Dominion, Thraxus hissed, his translator struggling to capture the appropriate level of contempt in his voice. Look at them, they barely have atmospheric shielding on half their vessels. Their weapon systems are held together with what their data streams call duct tape and prayers, end quote. Subcommander Velix chittered from her station, her compound eyes reflecting the tactical readouts in hundreds of tiny fragments. Intelligence confirms their largest battleship is called the HMS Defiance. It masses approximately 1/10th of our smallest destroyer, their flagship, Admiral 1/10th. Thraxus let that sink in, watching as his officers exchanged amused glances. Some of them were already calculating victory bonuses, and they dare to position themselves between us and the mineral-rich asteroid belt we claimed 3 cycles ago. The humans had been a curiosity at first when they'd stumbled onto the galactic stage 7 standard years prior. Most species had viewed them with a mixture of pity and amusement. They were fragile, short-lived creatures from a backwater planet that had barely mastered fusion drives while the rest of the galaxy was using quantum-fold propulsion. Their diplomatic attempts were clumsy at best, insulting at worst, but they'd drawn a line in the void. The Corvath expansion had pushed into what Earth called rather dramatically their sphere of influence. 3 mining colonies, a handful of research outposts, nothing that warranted actual military intervention by any reasonable species. Humans apparently were not reasonable. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet, communications officer Delac announced, his antenna twitching with barely suppressed laughter. It's from their commanding officer, General Marcus Webb. Oncrene, Threx ordered, settling into his command throne with all the casual confidence of someone who'd conquered 47 star systems. The hologram flickered to life, revealing a human male with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then used to hammer nails. He wore a simple uniform, devoid of the elaborate decorations most species favored. Behind him, the bridge of the Defiance looked cramped, almost primitive compared to the Corvath command ship sprawling operations center. Admiral Thraxus, Webb said, his voice carrying that peculiar human quality of barely controlled aggression. This is your final warning. Turn your fleet around and vacate the Helios 7 sector within the next 6 hours, or we will consider it an act of war. The entire Corvath bridge burst into laughter. Thraxus didn't even try to stop them. It was too absurd. General Webb, Threx replied once the hilarity had died down to occasional snickers. Your entire fleet consists of 32 vessels. I have 417 warships under my command. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your shields could not stop a child's projectile weapon, and you threaten us with war. Webb's expression didn't change, not even a flicker. That should have been the first warning sign. 6 hours, Admiral. I suggest you use them wisely. The transmission cut off. Threxes stared at the blank screen for a moment, then burst into fresh laughter. Did you? Record that, send it to High Command. They will find it most entertaining. Helm, maintain our current heading. Weapons, charge the primary batteries. I want to give these humans a demonstration of what real military power looks like. But Velix wasn't laughing. She'd been studying the human fleet formation on her tactical display, her mandibles clicking in a pattern that indicated concern. Admiral, their positioning is unusual. Unusual how? Threxus waved a dismissive appendage. Unusually stupid. No, sir, it's almost like they're not trying to defend the sector at all. They're positioned in a wide dispersal pattern, maximum spacing between vessels. If we were to engage them, we'd have to split our fire across multiple vectors. It's inefficient for defense, but what, Subcommander? Velix's eyes flickered with uncertainty. I'm not sure, sir. It just seems wrong. Somehow. Threxus dismissed her concerns with a snort. The Corvath had not built an empire spanning 2 galaxies by second-guessing themselves when facing inferior opponents. Begin the advance. All ships combat. Formation Delta 7. Let's show these mammals what happens when they bark at their betters. The Corvath armada moved forward, a vast wall of metal and energy that had broken countless civilizations. Their ships were works of art and terror combined, sleek hulls covered in weapons, batteries that could reduce planets to rubble, shields that could withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads, engines that could fold space itself to cross vast distances in heartbeats. The human fleet, by comparison, looked like a collection of scrap metal someone had welded together during a particularly uninspired afternoon. Sir, human vessels are powering weapons. Drix reported their targeting systems are active. They're actually going to fight us. More laughter rippled through the bridge. Threx felt a moment of genuine pity for the humans. They were brave, he'd give them that. Suicidally stupid but brave. Open fire when we reach optimal range, he commanded. Aim for their engines. I want to disable them, not destroy them. Perhaps we can salvage their vessels and send them back to Earth as a lesson in humility. The range counter ticked down. 500,000 km, 400,000, 300,000. Webb's face appeared on the screen again. Uninvited this time. The human had somehow piggybacked on their own communication arrays, a minor annoyance that Threxus would have someone flogged for later. Admiral Webb said in this time there was something different in his voice, almost sad. I gave you 6 hours. You had a chance to leave with your honor intact. What you're about to witness is not something I take pleasure in. Remember that. Enough of your Threxus began, but Webb cut him off. Execute protocol, Wintertorm, the general said, not to Threxus, but to someone off-screen. Then things got weird. Human ships began moving, not away, but in a precise geometric pattern that made no tactical sense whatsoever. They formed a perfect sphere around the advancing Corvath fleet, maintaining exact distances from each other and from the Dominion vessels. What are they doing? Threxus demanded. Velix. Analysis. The subcommander's mandibles were clicking frantically. Now I don't know, sir. Their weapons are still powered, but they're not firing. They're channeling massive amounts of energy into their deflector arrays, but not for defense. It's like they're building up a charge, but for what? The first human ship turned white. Not a flash of light. Not an explosion, but a sudden complete transformation. The hull, the viewports, the weapons, arrays, everything became a brilliant, blinding white that hurt to look at. Then the second ship transformed. Then the third, within 10 seconds all. 32 human vessels had become perfect. Spheres of pure white energy. Sir, energy readings are going off the scale, Drix shouted, his antenna flattening against his skull in distress. I'm detecting quantum fluctuations across the entire sector. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting Spacem itself. The white light from the human ships began to spread, not through conventional means, not like a blast, wave or radiation pulse. It was more like reality itself was being rewritten, painted over with something new. The darkness of space was being replaced by an endless field of white. Threxus felt fear for the first time in 20 standard years. Evasive maneuvers, all ships. Emergency quantum fold, get us out of. Too late, the white reached the Corvath fleet, and when it touched the first vessel, something impossible happened. The battle cruiser KDS Relentless, ship that had participated in the siege of Xandros Prime and survived bombardment from 16 different angles simultaneously, simply stopped. Every system, every weapon, every life support function, all of it ceased operating in the same instant. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened to everyone on board. Threxus watched on his tactical display as ship after ship went dark, their IFFF signatures flattering, their quantum fold drives powering down, their reactors entering emergency shut down. 417 warships, the pride of the Corvath Dominion, rendered completely inert in less than a minute. Report, he screamed, his scales flashing between purple and yellow, a color combination that indicated panic among his species. What just happened? What did they do to us? I don't know, sir, Bellic stammered, her compound eyes wide with confusion. All our systems are operational, weapons, shields, drives. Everything is working perfectly, but what? But they won't respond to commands. It's like the ship is choosing not to obey us. That was insane. Ships didn't choose, they were machines, tools, extensions of their crew's will. They didn't have opinions or preferences, or the ability to simply refuse orders. Threxus tried his own command console, entering his personal authorization codes to force a manual weapons release. The system acknowledged his codes, displayed his command, and then did nothing, just sat there. All systems green and operational, but completely unresponsive to any actual instructions. Sir, incoming transmission, Draw said quietly. It's General Webb. The human's face filled the screen again, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood what appeared to be several other officers, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. Webb himself looked tired, like someone who just finished a job he'd hoped he'd never have to do. Admiral Thrax's Webb began, what you've just experienced is what we call a Faraday cascade. It's based on principles we discovered quite by accident about 5 years ago while trying to solve a completely unrelated problem. We found that quantum entanglement, when applied correctly, can create a field that doesn't destroy technology, doesn't damage it, doesn't even interfere with its operation. It just removes the ability to use it aggressively. Threxus tried to speak, found his translator wasn't working, and had to fall back on manual universal syntax codes. What have you done to my fleet? Your ships are fine, Admiral. Your crews are fine. You could make sandwiches in your galley right now if you wanted. You could play games on your entertainment system. You could even run diagnostics on your weapons. What you cannot do is fire those weapons. You cannot engage your drives to move aggressively. You cannot in fact perform any action that the field interprets as hostile or threatening. That's impossible. Velik's breathed. Technology doesn't work that way. Machines don't understand concepts like hostility or threat. They just execute commands. Webb smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. We thought the same thing. Turns out we were wrong. When you entangle quantum states across a wide enough field and introduce what we call intentionality matrices, the field itself becomes, for lack of a better term, aware, not sentient, not conscious, but aware enough to distinguish between aggressive and non-aggressive actions. The Faraday cascade creates a bubble of enforced peace. Nothing inside it can harm anything else inside it. Threxus felt his world tilting on its axis. You've created a weapon that prevents weapons from working. We've created a tool that prevents violence. Webb corrected. Big difference, Admiral. Your crews are welcome to try every override, every manual system, every backup they can think of. I assure you, we've already tried them all during testing. Nothing works. The field will remain in place for approximately 72 hours, then dissipate naturally. By that time, I expect you and your 417 ships will have had plenty of time to think about whether this sector is really worth dying for. You can't hold us here forever, Threxus snarled. When this field drops, we will raid destruction on your pathetic fleet, such as you cannot imagine. We will reduce Earth itself to cosmic dust. We will. You'll do nothing, Admiral. Webb's voice cut through the threat like a blade through tissue, because while you're sitting here contemplating your next move, I'm sending this entire engagement, complete with tactical data and technical readouts, to every single species in the known galaxy. I'm showing them exactly what happened here today. I'm demonstrating that humanity, the supposedly primitive mammals from the backwater planet, have developed a technology that makes aggressive warfare functionally obsolete. Velix made a choking sound. Threxus understood why. The implications were staggering. Do you understand what this means? Webb continued, his eyes hard as diamonds. It means any species that continues to pursue military expansion will be seen as deliberately choosing violence. When a non-violent alternative exists, it means the political calculus of the entire galaxy just shifted. It means you, Admiral Thraxus, and the Corvette Dominion are about to become a case study in why threatening your neighbors is no longer a viable strategy. The Dominion will never accept this, Threxus said, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his voice. We will develop countermeasures. We will adapt. We will. You will try, Webb agreed, and maybe eventually someone will figure out a way around the Faraday cascade. But here's the thing, Admiral, we didn't develop this technology yesterday. We've had it for years, which means we've also had years to develop our second generation systems and third generation, and so on. You're not trying to catch up to our current level. You're trying to hit a moving target that's already miles ahead of you. The human general leaned forward, his face filling the screen. I gave you 6 hours to turn around. Admiral, I begged you to choose dignity over humiliation. You laughed at us, you mocked our ships, our technology, our capabilities. And now you're sitting in a 400 billion credit warship that can't do anything more threatening than flash it's running. Lights, how does that feel? Threxus had no answer. What answer could there be? Here's what happens next, Webb said, his tone shifting to something almost businesslike. You're going to sit there for the next 3 days and contemplate your choices. Your crews will remain safe and comfortable, just unable to threaten anyone. When the field drops, you're going to turn your fleet around and go home. You're going to report to your superiors exactly what happened here, and then you're going to hope, pray, or whatever it is your species does that they're smarter than you were today. And if we refuse, Threxus asked, grasping at the last threads of his dignity, if we return with overwhelming force, Webb's expression didn't change. Then we'll activate a Faraday cascade around your home system instead. One that lasts not 72 hours, but 72 years. Your entire civilization will be frozen in a bubble of enforced peace while the rest of the galaxy moves on without you. Is that really the legacy you want to leave, Admiral, the species that chose stagnation over adaptation? The transmission ended. Threxus sat in his command throne, surrounded by working but useless technology, and felt the weight of his failure crushing down on him. Around the bridge his crew sat in stunned silence. No one moved, no one spoke. What was there to say? Sub-Commander was the first to break the silence, her voice small and uncertain. Sir, what do we do? Threxus looked at his tactical display, showing the 32 human vessels maintaining their perfect sphere around his paralyzed fleet. Each one still glowed with that impossible white light, reality itself bent to their will through means he couldn't begin to understand. We wait, he said finally. We wait and we think and we hope that whoever comes after me is wiser than I was. In the distance, if such a term had meaning, in the void, Earth continued its slow rotation around its average yellow star, a small planet populated by a supposedly primitive species that had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare without firing a single shot. The Corvath Dominion had come to this sector expecting an easy victory, a demonstration of their superiority, a chance to mock the presumptuous mammals who dared to stand against them. Instead, they become the punchline to a joke that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Admiral Thraxus closed his eyes, his scales fading to a dull gray of defeat, and wondered how he'd explain this to High Command. How did you tell the most powerful military force in 2 galaxies that they'd been rendered completely helpless by a species they dismissed as inconsequential? How did you explain that humanity hadn't beaten them through superior firepower, or better tactics, or overwhelming force, but through something far more terrifying, superior thinking? The white field pulsed gently around the immobilized fleet, a constant reminder that sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't one that destroys, but one that simply refuses to let you destroy others. And somewhere on the bridge of the Defiance, General Marcus Webb allowed himself a small smile before turning to his crew and saying 5 words that would become legendary among human military forces. All right, stand down. Nap time's over. The first 12 hours were the worst Admiral Thraxus had faced orbital bombardments, multi-front battles, and once had to evacuate a command ship that was actively breaking apart around him, but sitting in a perfectly functional warship that simply refused to be a warship. That was a special kind of torture. His crew tried everything. Engineering teams pulled apart control nodes looking for some kind of foreign hardware. Weapons specialists ran 17 different diagnostic sequences. The ship's tactical AI was rebooted 43 times. Nothing worked. The systems were pristine, operational, and completely disobedient. Around hour 16, Lieutenant Grixer from the KDS Vengeance reported something peculiar over the fleet-wide channel. His voice carried equal parts frustration and bewilderment. "Sir, we tried to fire a torpedo manually, bypassed every electronic system, used purely mechanical releases. The warhead ejected from the tube exactly as designed, but and I know how. This sounds, it just floated there. Didn't arm, didn't propel, just sat in space like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Retrieve it," Threxus ordered tiredly. "We tried, sir. The retrieval systems won't activate because the AI categorizes recovering an armed weapon as potentially hostile action. We're stuck looking at our own torpedo through the viewports like it's some kind of abstract art installation." Threxus heard someone laugh on another channel, then another. Within minutes, dark humor was spreading through the fleet like a virus. Jokes about the most expensive parking lot in galactic history, speculation about whether the humans would start charging hourly rates. Someone started a betting pool on which ship would be the first to successfully make a sandwich, since food preparation seemed to be the only activity the Faraday Cascade didn't consider threatening. By hour 24, the laughter had faded into a grim acceptance. Threxus wandered through his flagship, observing his crew adapting to their bizarre captivity. In the recreation bay, off-duty personnel played games and watched entertainment feeds. In the galley, the cooking staff prepared meals with impressive normalcy. Life continued just without any of the military purpose that had brought them here. He found Vel in the observation deck, staring out at the white field that surrounded them. The subcommander's compound eyes reflected the light in kaleidoscopic patterns. "It's beautiful in a way," she said without turning. "Terrifying but beautiful." They turned warfare into art. They turned us into fools, Threx corrected bitterly. "No, sir, we did that ourselves." Velix finally looked at him. "I've been reading human history. Did you know they've fought over 15,000 wars on their own planet? They've spent most of their existence killing each other over resources, territory, ideology, religion, things that barely matter in the grand scheme, and somehow that's what made them experts at stopping war." "What do you mean?" "They understand violence in ways we don't, Admiral. The Corvette conquered through overwhelming force. We're good at war because we've always been good at it. Humans are good at war because they've tried everything else first and failed repeatedly. Every peace treaty they ever broke taught them something. Every ceasefire that collapsed showed them another flaw. They didn't stop fighting because they became enlightened. They stopped because they got tired of burying their children." Threx felt something uncomfortable squirming in his chest. "You're saying we're too successful to understand peace?" "I'm saying maybe defeat is a better teacher than victory, sir." Before he could respond, Drax's voice crackled. Through the shipwide system, Admiral. You need to see this. We're receiving a data package from the human fleet. It's, well, just come to the bridge, sir. When Threxus arrived, his bridge crew was clustered around the communication station, staring at a holographic display with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. Projections showed schematics, equations, theoretical frameworks, all labeled human standard script with helpful translations. What am I looking at? Threxus demanded. The complete technical specifications. For the Faraday cascade, Dratch said, his antenna twitching in the way that indicated his brain was struggling to process information. General Webb just sent us everything, how it works, how it's generated, the theoretical limits of the field, even the mathematical proofs underlying the intentionality matrices. He gave us the entire blueprint. The bridge fell silent. Even the background hum of the ship's systems seemed to quiet, as if the vessel itself was holding its breath. That's impossible, Threxus said flatly. No species shares their most advanced military technology with an enemy. It's strategic suicide. Vel was already reviewing the data, her mandibles clicking rapidly as she processed the information. It's all here, Admiral. Not just surface level descriptions, but actual implementation details. With this, any species with sufficient technical capability could reproduce the cascade within a standard year, maybe less, if they dedicated resources to it. Why? Threxus whispered. Why would they do this? A new message appeared on the screen, text only from General Webb himself, because deterrence only works if everyone has access to the same deterrent, because peace through superior firepower is just tyranny. Wearing a friendly mask, because we learned the hard way that the only way to truly end an arms race is to make the arms obsolete. You wanted to know what makes humanity dangerous, Admiral. It's not our weapons or our tactics or our stubborn refusal to acknowledge when we're outmatched. It's our absolute conviction that problems are meant to be solved, not managed. We looked at 10,000 years of warfare and said, enough. Then we figured out how to make enough a reality. Now we're sharing that reality with everyone else, whether they asked for it or not. See you in 72 hours. Bring better arguments next time. Threxus read the message 3 times. Each read through, making him feel smaller and more foolish. The humans hadn't just defeated the Corvath Dominion, they'd rendered the very concept of the Corvath Dominion's military supremacy meaningless, then handed everyone else the tools to do the same. They're insane, he muttered. Completely, absolutely insane. Or brilliant, Velix countered. Think about it, sir. If everyone has access to the cascade, no one can use it for conquest. It becomes purely defensive. Any species that tries to invade another will find themselves frozen, just like we are. The technology enforces cooperation through mutual inability to commit aggression. That's not peace, that's enforced stalemate. Is there a difference? Velix asked quietly. Peace is just a stalemate where both sides decided to call it something nicer. Over the next 2 days, word spread throughout the paralyzed fleet. The humans had published the cascade specifications not just to the Corvath, but to the entire galactic community. The Interstellar Council was already convening emergency sessions. The Heptarch Collective had announced they were suspending all military operations pending technological review. Even the notoriously aggressive Krell swarms had gone silent, presumably trying to figure out how this changed their expansion. Calculus, humanity, the species that had arrived on the galactic stage barely knowing how fusion drives worked, had just rewritten the fundamental rules of interstellar relations, and they'd done it by giving away their greatest weapon for free. On the third day, precisely 72 hours after it had begun, the white field started to dissipate. It didn't vanish suddenly, but faded gradually, like morning fog burning off under a rising sun. Threxus watched from his bridge as color returned to the surrounding space as the stars became visible again beyond the human fleet sphere. His tactical systems came back online without fanfare. Weapons responded to commands. The drives accepted navigation input. KDS Eternal was once again a fully functional battleship. All 417 vessels in the Corvette Armada reported the same status, operational and ready for combat. Nobody gave the order to attack. General Webb's face appeared on the main screen one final time. He looked even more tired than before, his eyes carrying the weight of someone who just changed galactic history and wasn't entirely sure if he'd done the right thing. Admiral Thraxus, Webb said, his voice carefully neutral. Your ships are yours again. You're free to make whatever choice you want. Fight, flee, negotiate. We'll respond accordingly. But before you decide, I want you to understand something. That Cascade field you just experienced, that's Generation 1, crude, limited in range, requires 32 ships to generate and maintain. We already have Generation 4 in testing. Single ship deployment, galactic scale. Range, indefinite duration. If we wanted to, we could blanket this entire sector in enforced peace for the next century. We're not doing that because we believe in choice, even when those choices are stupid. But make no mistake, Admiral, the age of conquest through military might is over, not because it's morally wrong, though it is, not because the galaxy has evolved past such barbarism, though I hope we will, but because it's now functionally impossible. You can rage against that reality, or you can adapt to it. Your decision. Threxus looked around his bridge. His crew stared back at him, waiting for orders that he suddenly realized he had no wisdom to give. What did you command when your entire military doctrine had become obsolete in 72 hours? Stand down, he said finally. All ships power down, weapons and disengage. Targeting systems, helm plot a return course to Corvette Prime. We're going home. Sir Velik sounded surprised. We outnumber them more than 10 to 1. We could still what? Sub-Commander. Win a battle that proves we learned nothing. Start a war that would end the moment they deploy their Generation 4 technology and lock our entire civilization in a peace bubble for 100 years. Show the galaxy that Corvette pride is stronger than Corvette intelligence. Threxus shook his head slowly. No, we lost this engagement the moment we laughed at them. We just didn't know it yet. He turned back to the screen where Webb waited patiently. General, you've made your point. The Corvette Dominion will withdraw from this sector and will send formal diplomatic overtures regarding territorial boundaries. I assume your government will respond appropriately. Webb nodded once. We will, and Admiral, for what it's worth, I genuinely hope we can find a better way to coexist. War is expensive, exhausting, and ultimately pointless if we could redirect even a fraction of the resources we spend on it toward literally anything else. The entire galaxy would benefit. That's not naive optimism, that's just math. Humans, Threxy sighed. You're all completely mad. Yeah, Webb agreed, with a faint smile, but we're consistently mad, which counts for something. Safe travels, Admiral. Try not to invade anyone on your way home. The transmission ended. The human fleet broke formation, their vessels peeling away in different directions like seeds, dispersing on solar wind. Within 20 minutes, they'd vanished into the black, leaving the Corvette Armada alone with their thoughts and their thoroughly bruised egos. As the fleet began its long journey back to Corvette space, Threxus sat in his command throne and contemplated the report he'd have to file. How did you explain to high command that you'd been defeated without a shot fired, that humanity had beaten them not through superior violence but through superior non-violence, that the age of military expansion had ended not with a bang but with an awkward pause while everyone recalibrated their understanding of power? Velix approached him quietly, holding data pad. Sir, I've been running projections based on the Cascade specifications. If even half the major species adopt this technology within the next standard year, and initial reports suggest most will, then the mathematics of warfare change completely. Aggressive military action becomes self-defeating. The only winning move is literally not to play. You sound like you're quoting something human entertainment media, actually ancient digital game from their pre-space era. The game was about global thermonuclear war, and the A learned that the only way to win was to not fight at all. They've been working toward this conclusion for centuries. Sir, we just weren't paying attention. Threxus pulled up his personal logs and began dictating his report, choosing his words carefully. Future generations of Corvth would study this engagement. He knew they'd analyze his decisions, his tactics, his failures. He wanted to make sure they understood the real lesson. Personal log, Admiral Threxus, timestamp 27,496. Star date 9,412. Today, the Corvette Dominion learned that the galaxy has changed in ways we failed to recognize. We encountered an enemy that defeated us, not through superior force but through superior understanding. Humanity has introduced a technology that makes traditional warfare obsolete, then shared that technology freely with all species. I do not know if this will lead to lasting peace or merely to new forms of conflict we cannot yet imagine. What I do know is that the assumptions underlying our military doctrine, our expansion strategy, and our position, the galactic hierarchy, are no longer valid. We must adapt or become irrelevant. End log. He closed the file and leaned back, feeling every one of his 46 standard years through the viewport. The stars looked the same as they always had, but he knew that was an illusion. Everything had changed. The universe he'd known, the one where strength meant firepower and influence came from the threat of violence, had been replaced by something stranger and potentially more dangerous. A universe where the weak could make themselves equal to the strong, not through matching force but through eliminating force entirely, where the most devastating weapon was one that prevented you from using weapons at all, where humanity, the species everyone had dismissed as inconsequential had rewritten the rules and then invited everyone else to play by them. 3 months later, Threxus stood before the Corvette High Council delivering his formal report on the incident that was already being called the Helios humiliation across the galactic networks. The council chambers were packed with military officials, politicians, and representatives from various allied species, all eager to hear firsthand about humanity's new technology. And you're certain the technical specifications they provided are genuine? Grand Admiral Kessex asked, his scaled brow furrowed with concern. Not some elaborate deception. Our top scientists have verified the mathematics, sir. It's genuine. Moreover, 4 other species have already successfully replicated Generation 1 cascades in laboratory conditions. The Vin Confederacy reportedly achieved a functional field test 2 weeks ago. Humanity gave us the real blueprint, not a fake. Madness. Kessex muttered. What species arms their potential enemies? A species that understands the technology only works if everyone has it, Threxus replied. Species that's apparently been planning this move for years, while the rest of us assumed they were simply struggling to catch up technologically. The council chamber erupted in arguments, debates about how to respond, whether to develop their own cascade technology or find countermeasures, whether this represented an opportunity or a threat. Threxus let the noise wash over him, thinking about General Webb's tired eyes and careful words. Finally, the Grand Coordinator called for silence. Admiral Threx, in your professional opinion, what is humanity's ultimate goal with this technology? Threxus considered his answer carefully. I believe, sir, that they genuinely want to end large-scale warfare, not because they're pacifists. Their history shows they're quite capable of violence, but because they concluded that the costs outweigh any possible benefits. They've done the mathematics and decided that peace, even enforced peace, is simply more efficient than eternal conflict. And you think we should accept this? I think, sir, that we don't have a choice. The technology exists now. Within a year, dozens of species will have functional cascade generators. Within 5 years, it will be standard defensive technology across most of civilized space. The question isn't whether we accept it, but whether we adapt to the new reality or cling to outdated doctrines until we become irrelevant. The Grand Coordinator studied him with ancient calculating eyes. You sound like you admire them. Admiral, I respect them, sir. There's a difference. They identified a problem, conceptualized a solution, implemented that solution, and shared it with everyone, including their enemies. That takes a kind of courage we don't often see, or perhaps a kind of madness. I honestly can't tell which. The council eventually voted to establish a research division dedicated to studying the cascade technology while simultaneously opening diplomatic channels with Earth to discuss what they were calling the new galactic framework. It was a cautious approach, neither embracing nor rejecting the changes humanity had introduced, which was probably the most Corvette response possible. As Threxus left the council chambers, Velix caught up with him in the corridor. Sir, I've been offered a position in the new research division. They want someone with first-hand experience of the cascade's effects. Congratulations, Subcommander. You'll do well there. Will you join us? We could Use your tactical expertise too. Understand the strategic implications. Threxus shook his head slowly. No, I think my career as a military commander is effectively over, hard to justify. Maintaining a war fleet when war itself is becoming obsolete. I'll probably retire, write my memoirs, try to explain to future generations how we managed to be so blind. We weren't blind, sir. We just couldn't imagine a different way of thinking. None of us could accept the humans, except the humans, Velix agreed. They stood in silence for a moment, two career military officers contemplating a future where their expertise might no longer matter. Finally, Velix spoke. Again, her voice thoughtful. You know what I find most remarkable, sir? They didn't gloat. Webb could have rubbed our faces in it, could have made speeches about human superiority, could have turned us into a propaganda victory. Instead, he just looked sad and tired and ready for it all to be over. Like defeating us wasn't a triumph, but a chore. Because for them, it probably was. Threx said they weren't trying to win a war, they were trying to prevent all future wars. We were just in the way. Somewhere across the galaxy, aboard a human vessel whose name and location were classified, General Marcus Webb sat in his quarters, reviewing reports from the Cascade deployment. The operation had been a complete success. 0 casualties on both sides. Full technology transfer achieved. Diplomatic channels opening across multiple species. The projections suggested galactic warfare could be reduced by 70%. Within a decade, 90% within a generation. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he just felt old. His second-in-command, Colonel Emma Torres, knocked on his doorframe. General Intelligence says the Corvath are cooperating fully. No signs of retaliation planning. The diplomatic corps is calling it the most successful strategic operation in human history. Good, Webb said quietly. That's good. You don't sound happy about it, sir. I am happy, Emma. I'm also aware that we just fundamentally altered how hundreds of species interact with each other, and there will be consequences we can't predict. We solved one problem and probably created 20 new ones. Torres leaned against the doorframe. But the new problems won't involve millions of people dying in wars nobody really wanted, so I call that progress. Webb smiled faintly. When did you get so optimistic? Around the time I realized we'd actually pulled it off, sir. We made something that prevents killing instead of causing it. That's worth being optimistic about. After Torres left, Webb pulled up the tactical recording from the engagement, watching once more as the Corvath fleet realized what had happened to them. He'd watched it dozens of times now, studying Admiral Thrax's reactions, looking for any sign they'd pushed too hard or humiliated the Corvath beyond what was necessary. But mostly he just watched the moment when the White Field had deployed successfully, when 7 years of research and development and testing had finally proven themselves in real conditions, the moment when humanity had taken its most violent impulses and weaponized peace instead. His personal terminal chimed with a new message. It was from his daughter studying xenobiology at the university back on Earth. She'd seen the news reports and wanted to know if her dad was the General Webb everyone was talking about, the one who'd stopped a war without fighting it, the one who'd made the galaxy safer for her generation. Webb typed back a simple response. Yeah, that was me. Don't let it go too Your head, someone still has to take out. The recycling when I get home. He sent the message and leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. The Korvath had learned their lesson. The galaxy was adapting, and somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, life continued with all its mundane beauty and frustrating complexity. The fleet that had mocked Earth's army had discovered that sometimes the most devastating response isn't the one that destroys your enemy, but the one that makes destroying your enemy impossible. They'd expected fire and fury, violence, matching violence, the ancient dance of escalation that had driven galactic politics for millennia. Instead, they'd gotten peace, enforced unavoidable, absolutely non-negotiable peace, and somehow that had been far more terrifying than any weapon could ever be. General Marcus Webb closed his eyes and allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, his daughter's generation would grow up in a galaxy that had finally learned what humanity had spent 10,000 years figuring out, that the real victory wasn't winning the war, it was making the war impossible to fight in the first place. And if that made humans mad, dangerous, or unpredictable by galactic standards, well, they'd been called worse things by better people. At least this time, their particular brand of madness had saved lives instead of ending them. That Webb decided was probably the best outcome anyone could hope for.